Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars news update. So over the last 24 hours there have been a few developments regarding the Bad Batch Season 2 release date. As I covered the other day, it was removed from the coming in September listing, but then yesterday fans noticed on the Australian Disney Plus website it was still listed as September the 28th. However, word spread very quickly, and Disney themselves caught wind of it, and now the page has been removed, and so the Australian listing was clearly a mistake. So a few fans reached out to Disney Plus via their social media pages and asked them when the Bad Batch Season 2 is dropping, and they confirmed it is still September the 28th, but as some folks noted, the Disney social media mods might not have been given an updated schedule, but with Disney Plus Day and D23 just around the corner, it's just a matter of time until Disney and Lucasfilm confirm to us when Season 2 is coming out. Now, another possible clue is found in the latest issue of Star Wars Insider. The Bad Batch Season 2 is no longer listed as coming soon, but then again neither is Andor, and that could signify that both series are still coming out next month. So what does all of this mean? Honestly guys, nobody knows. There is still a chance they tell us on Disney Plus Day that September the 28th is the release. But similarly, there's also evidence that states it's going to be pushed back. Now Lucasfilm haven't marketed the Bad Batch at all outside of Star Wars Celebration back in May, and considering we're just under a month out from the initial release date, there is a very good chance it's going to be pushed back. Otherwise there would have been at least some character posters, some social media mention, publicity, marketing and so on. But Andor is the current focus, and this makes me think it's going to be the only Star Wars series in September, pushing the Bad Batch back to at least October. But let's wait and see. As I say, September the 28th is still a possibility. They just need to clarify. And so now my dear Mandalorians, we're gonna talk about Princess Leia's wedding, because thanks to Variety, we have concept art that shows off Leia Organa's wedding gown. It looks absolutely incredible in green, with golden trims and floral accessories. This does justice to Return of the Jedi. There's a very Andor-esque vibe to her, especially with her hair. A new synopsis for the book was released alongside the photo, which teases how their union, the union of Han and Leia, is a lightning rod for all that makes it abundantly clear that the war is not over. Now, as we know, there's been a big push by Lucasfilm to tell the events after Episode 6, not just with The Mandalorian, but also with comic book and novel initiatives, this time being The Princess and the Scoundrel. And I guess the reason I wanted to cover this is because it really does justice to the legacy of Carrie Fisher. It was such a sad day when we lost our galactic princess in 2016. Not only did the world lose such a fantastic person, but an icon and brilliant actress as well. But I think it's great with recent projects, things like this, and also the Kenobi series, that they're keeping Fisher's spirit alive. The character of Leia will never truly die, so I thought this was a nice tribute. I'm a big fan of the way they made her look, very George Lucas-esque, and as I say, does justice to her appearance in Episode 6. Awesome stuff. So next up guys, we're gonna talk about the Andor series, because Diego Luna opened up about a reason he almost quit. Now this piece of news, on top of all of the amazing updates for the show we've had, should give you great hope that this show is gonna really deliver something special. So in a new interview, Luna talked about when he first arrived at Pinewood Studios for stunt work during pre-production, and they pushed him to the absolute physical limit. Every part of his body was aching, and he says, quote, "I felt like I went into battle," and he tongue-in-cheek says he almost considered quitting, but what he's saying is he did a lot of his own stunts, and his role is very physical, especially when compared to Rogue One. It sounds like he gave absolutely everything to this performance. In his own words, he went on to say, "I'm gonna say that probably like it was the first or second day. They had stunts where you had to climb, to jump, to fall, to roll, and I go like, let's do a very simple one. I need to get back into this." And the next morning, his body was aching, and he said, quote, "I'm gonna have to quit this job. I just can't handle this anymore." But his efforts are not going to go unnoticed. The Andor series sounds like it's going to be absolutely amazing. Now I know Cassian Andor's not really what you call a fan favourite, but he really should be, and I think he will be after this show. I know the few lucky fans who got to see Rogue One, the re-release in IMAX, they said that the extended clip of Andor was absolutely insane. As the public, we got to see a minute and a half, but literally 2 seconds later in that scene, shit really goes down. And what's great about that, on top of everything we know about the series, not just the grittiness, the politics, but it's also going to be an amazing action-adventure film, and to hear that Diego Luna gave 100% makes me so happy. He's such a talented guy. And so now, my dear friends, an update on Rian Johnson. So the other day I spoke about how in a new interview with Empire magazine, he was going to sit down and talk about The Last Jedi 5 years later. Well, at last, the article's been published and he's opened up about his thoughts on the film, half a decade on. Let's dive into it. Rian Johnson is even more proud of Star Wars The Last Jedi 5 years on, exclusive. If there's a line of dialogue in Episode 8 The Last Jedi that feels particularly apt, it's one spoken by Luke Skywalker. "This is not going to go the way you think." Writer-director Rian Johnson's middle chapter of the sequel trilogy was a rich, adventurous, mythical tale continuing the stories of Rey, Kylo Ren, Finn, and Poe Dameron that also dug into the deep soul of Luke Skywalker himself, decades after the triumphant finale of Return of the Jedi. I suppose them calling it rich and adventurous is of course subjective. A lot of fans would say it was the opposite. Let's carry on. Along the way, it contained all kinds of surprises, developing the threads of The Force Awakens in fresh and unexpected ways. I would say the opposite. I would call The Last Jedi the anti-Force Awakens. Apart from explaining why Luke is on Arc 2, The Last Jedi went a completely different way to The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker. Empire carry on by saying it was another box office smash, pulling in over 1.3 billion worldwide, but it also challenged its audience in ways that some weren't quite prepared for at the time. In a major new Empire interview, Rian Johnson looks back on The Last Jedi for its 5th anniversary, reflecting with a few years' distance on his episode in the Skywalker saga. So here is the quote: "I'm even more proud of it 5 years on. When I was up at the bat, I really swung at the ball. The film," he says, "is not just a Star Wars movie, it's a movie about Star Wars and what it means to fans, himself included." He says, "I think it's impossible for any of us to approach Star Wars without thinking about it as a myth that we were raised with, and how that myth, that story, baked itself into us and affected us. The ultimate intent was not to strip away, the intent was to get to the basic fundamental power of myth, and ultimately, I hope the film is an affirmation of the power of the myth of Star Wars in our lives." And funnily enough, I actually kind of agree with this statement. Even though he was all about subverting expectations, and even though the film has flaws in executing what it sets out to do, of all 3 sequel movies, The Last Jedi gets to the heart of the mythology trope better than the other 2. It's not just a fan service and nostalgia outing like the others. Empire magazine go on to say that extends to its controversial depiction of Luke Skywalker as a hermit who's closed himself off from the Force, having sensed darkness in his nephew Ben Solo and accidentally pushed him further towards the dark side as Kylo Ren. But as much as Luke begins the film in a very different place than when we left him at the end of the original trilogy, his arc over the course of The Last Jedi, ending in his death and the birth of the new Skywalker legend, sees him becoming a galactic symbol of hope and rebellion once more. Rian says, "The final images of the movie to me are not deconstructing the myth of Luke Skywalker, they're building it, and they're him embracing it," the director explains. "They're him absolutely defying the notion of throw away the past and embracing what actually matters about his myth, and going on to inspire the next generation. So for me, the process of stripping away is always in the interest of getting to something essential that really matters." Now, I'm in 2 minds about this, because on the one hand, the second half of Luke's arc in the film is fine. The way he starts out and his personification throughout the movie is very inconsistent with the point of Luke Skywalker according to George Lucas. And I'm not just talking about throwing away the lightsaber. I could 100% get on board with the Luke who saw the lies of the Jedi when he studied the past as he did and lost hope in the Order, but as Mark Hamill said, Luke Skywalker was the symbol of hope in the galaxy, and he wouldn't just give up for all those years, he'd eventually get back on his feet. Maybe he'd isolate for a few weeks, but not for decades. And even if Luke renounced what he saw the Jedi as, if you remember the speech he gives to Rey, the character he is would become a sort of Qui-Gon figure, becoming wiser by only listening to the will of the Force. But not this kind of recluse. Luke at the end of 7 and a good portion of 8 is nothing like that. He's become so bittered by his experiences that as audiences, it was such a contrast to who we knew him as in Return of the Jedi. And yes, I do understand a lot of time passes between the 2 trilogies, and the Mandalorian might continue to expand upon his downfall, but to give praise to The Last Jedi, Luke does go out with peace and purpose. That's even the name of the track that plays when he dies, and the second half of his arc was much more like the Luke of old. But there's no wonder that a lot of fans took issue with the way Luke is introduced in the movie. It's just not the Luke Skywalker fans knew, and I do understand the purpose of the film is to remove the myth of Luke from the character himself. A lot of people talk about the humanity that we have to consider in the film, and the message of our heroes falling and not being these supreme beings. The message pertaining to the Force even makes that clear on Canto Bight, where Ryan is saying the Force belongs to everyone, not just a select few like the Skywalkers. I do get that message, but it could have been handled much better. That's basically the interview, my dear friends. 5 years later, Lucasfilm are filling in the missing years with novels like Shadow of the Sith and shows like The Mandalorian and its spin-offs, but for many fans, there is irreparable damage to their version of Luke, the superhero of the galaxy. Now for me, even though I'm not a huge sequels fan, I do appreciate the good aspects of the 3 films. There was certainly a lot of potential there with the characters, and even some scenes I'll happily say are absolutely brilliant, but generally speaking, the lack lack of planning, the messiness surrounding production, all contributed to what a lot of people call the anti-trilogy. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, guys. Let's try and keep it civil. I know with the sequel trilogy, there is often a myriad of opinions. How do you perceive the film 5 years on? Have you grown to enjoy it? Do you dislike it as a Star Wars movie? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, guys, as always, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you always. I'm Star Wars Meg. Have a good one.